Welcome to the TNC Random Fandom Podcast. We are here to have fun and talk all things pop culture, collecting, and nerd culture in general. Make sure you join the conversation during our live stream with our most excellent hosts, Craig Borden and Tommy Mock. Let the shenanigans begin.
Good evening, everybody. Tommy Mock here, and welcome to another episode of the TNC Random Fandom Podcast. And with me, as always, my awesomest co-host, Mr. Craig Borden. How are you, good sir?
Oh, lovely. Come on. We're going to have a fun talking tonight about a rather good, fun topic, unexpected topic, but we'll get to why that some of our advertising has been wrong for 3-4 days, but we're going to get to that point. But anyway, it's awesome to be here as always, Tommy, hanging out with you, goofing around, talking whatever fandom we have.
Yes, of course. And it's funny you should mention that because we wish our friends at the Yankee Clipper good health and that they get well soon. But
We'll be rescheduled.
we will reschedule that. But before we get started with our topic, I got some news that I was actually I didn't even want to share with you before we started. So you know how we did the well, you kind of tagged along, but you're still part of it. We did the cosplay contest.
Yes.
Well, the gentleman that is running it asked me if I would be willing to do that again at the Niagara Con in Niagara Falls, and I said that tentatively I will do it. I was actually supposed to get a surgery on my elbow, which I will postpone because, and I may potentially have a acting gig in a short film.
Ooh.
So who knows? Maybe. But other than that,
celebrity.
Why don't you tell us what our episode is tonight?
Well, tonight we are going to talk all things Saturday Night Live, and what a wonderful time that we can be talking about everything SNL when they're just 1 week removed from their 50th anniversary. And holy Nikes, 50 years of this. And to that point, this is a show that barely made it out into the 80s. There is a point that Saturday Night Live was nearly dead, like what, 10 years into it or so, and with a cast of cast-offs basically at that point. Come on, this is when the kids from the Breakfast Club was on that cast. You had Robert Downey Jr., Julia Louis-Dreyfus. It was crazy. Like, John Lovitz was the only one that really survived from that cast, and it was rather amusing. But to that point, it was a fun run. It's been awesome. There's been amazing amounts of pop culture and influence that have been coming from the Saturday Night Live group over the years. Countless acts have went crazy levels of, I'll say, influence, to the point where they are the ones that are basically the sole reason I enjoy comedy from my movie fandom as a kid. It's amazing what the Farm Club of Saturday Night Live has produced for comedy in general, Tommy, and I cannot be happier to be talking about how that's went over the years tonight.
So, did you get an opportunity to watch the movie of the hour and a half before Saturday Night Live? I think it's called Saturday Night. Have you gotten a chance to watch that?
I did. I truly enjoyed it. It was really funny to see I'll say, some of the backstage stories you didn't know if they were truly true or not. Chevy Chase basically roasting some of the higher ups in a quasi back room drinking opportunity, I would say, before the show went to air. I thought it was a great part that Willem Dafoe ended up playing, as the exec that was just trying to get in a fight with Johnny Carson and said, hey, you know what, you can have your little show and see how it goes, because that was the argument. Does Saturday Night get to go live, or do they run the Johnny Carson rerun? That was the question.
Right.
Of the underlying pain.
It was right. And I think, if I remember correctly from watching that movie, they were in kind of like a contract dispute with Johnny Carson. So they were basically going to give Lorne Michaels this one shot. You got to shoot your shot, and he did. And looking at someone
to fail, right? That was the catch.
Right. And the funny thing
is the reason that you're called the not ready for prime time players.
Right. But the funny thing is that you look at some of those older first season skits and shows. Some of them you kind of look back and you're like, oh, that's kind of dated, or that
Some are pretty damn
who,
funny
who
still.
who thought, but that's the thing though, is some people will be like, who thought that was funny, you know? But
Yeah,
that very first
but
skit that they show in the movie, I watched again with John Belushi. That
yeah.
it hits differently than it does in the movie, the way that they portray
Yes.
it.
But it was very amusing to the point where obviously John Belushi, for anybody who hasn't seen it, the first sketch is a great tip of the hat of where the whole show went to. John Belushi's playing a foreigner trying to learn English accents and just talk American, basically, right?
Mhm.
And John Donahue is the one that's teaching him allegedly, and he's reading him a book and having him repeat it. And he gets to the point where there's so much back and forth repeating for some reason talking about feeding my fingertips to the Wolverines. And then Donahue has a heart attack, allegedly. So he's now laying on the ground, and Belushi doesn't know what to do and just does the same damn thing.
Right.
And then, of
And then
course, Chevy Chase comes out, says the line, and history.
and history is made at that point. I gotta say that I thoroughly enjoyed that movie. I thought the movie was, and if even a fraction of that is 100% true, I would have to say then I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to see all of that happening in real life, but
I want to
I
know how much fun they had portraying those characters, just goofing around the set.
they
The women that played Jane Curtin and everybody were perfectly spot on. The guy that played Chevy Chase and John Belushi
mhm.
nailed it. And
I
it was just the woman that played Lorraine Newman. I think might have been just a clone of her at a younger age. I really was shocked.
I gotta say with the 50th anniversary though, I was surprised to see Lorraine Newman, and she actually looked really, really good,
Just looks like
Garrett
she's aged as the same as she was. It doesn't you could tell it's the same person. Some people when they get older, they just don't look like them anymore.
right,
It's like, okay, great. Like if you had a time machine, she still looks like Lorraine Newman.
but Garrett Morris making an appearance, which was fantastic. Seeing him on Two Broke Girls was, is a
One of the best
delight.
characters ever.
But going back to the early years, I didn't know that apparently Garrett Morris was a theatrical. He wasn't even from comedy. He was a theatrical actor, like a true thespian, if you will.
Yes.
And he was, I mind blown, mind blown. I was like, wow, I did not know that.
And to that point, translated into comedy perfectly because he had a
Mhm.
great delivery.
Yep.
To talk Garrett Morris for just 0.2 seconds extra here, I still love what him and Chevy Chase did together on the Weekend Update. Who, by the way, Chevy Chase was perfect for Weekend Update to start that whole thing. But the news for the hearing impaired, which was just Chevy Chase reading the news and with a of Garrett Morris kind of up here in the with him just going, and today just yelling it and screaming it as loud as he could over the microphone with every word that Chevy Chase was saying. There was no sign language or and just
You
perfect
know,
stupid
and
comedy. But that was the counterculture vibe that they were shooting for. They wanted to display young people comedy, great music, and they did that to a T with the original cast.
mhm. I gotta say though, a lot of the skits, and they even kind of address this in the 50th anniversary special, of things that could not air in today's
Things that have
media
aged a little poorly.
extremely poorly, from those very first years
Yeah.
to even, going back 10 years, 15, 20 years. I mean, back in the 90s, a lot of very what would be considered problematic either characters or situations or even guests. I mean, they pointed out
Yes.
like R. Kelly and P. Diddy, I mean, Yeah,
They
you think
put
about
out
it
a
now.
bunch of things in that same thing, like they also like the Samurai Deli. Would that be allowed today with the just the fact that you had a white guy playing an Asian person?
Right.
John Belushi was hilarious in that bit. But it is obviously portraying a stereotype. But I think the funnier thing on that whole thing is on the 50th show, they bring up that politically incorrect stuff from the history, right? And they get the squeakiest of clean person in Tom Hanks to be the one that says, and here's some sketches that died. It's like,
So,
it was spot on. It was perfect. It was great to see that from that same comedic value.
so,
Good.
so aside from I know that there were some omissions, and I actually looked them up. There wasn't a real in memoriam section. I mean, key personnel
Other than
were
those dead
mentioned,
sketches.
but right, well, the sketches and problematic characters and stuff like that. But in like true in memoriam, and I know that in the 40th anniversary, they did an actual like we're paying tribute to the people that have died from our past. But one of the omissions that I even if it's a 50th anniversary, I still think they should have done a true in memoriam for Gilda Radner and a lot of the Chris Farley, those.
Yeah.
But one person, and believe it or not, this actually kind of upset me a little bit that it didn't get mentioned, is Don Pardo. Don Pardo was the original voice of Saturday Night Live for like 39 years. And when he died in 2014, Daryl Hammond came
Yeah.
back just to be the voice of Saturday Night Live. But Don Pardo
Getting a
had
paycheck. I
Don
think that was the
Pardo
bit.
had
He
that
actually needed a
voice.
paycheck.
Right, right. But he even now he comes on and he plays Donald Trump now, but he always did the Bill Clinton, parody, but now, Alec Baldwin isn't doing the Donald Trump character anymore. It's Daryl Hammond.
Statutory.
Right. But Don Pardo was the voice of Saturday Night Live, in my opinion, because he was the first, after they do the intro and the live from New York at Saturday night, then you hear Don Pardo's voice.
All the cast members, the
Yep.
horns and everything in the music.
Mhm.
Yep,
Yep.
100%.
I was glad to see G.E. Smith again. Old
There you
S.G. Smith.
I was glad that they gave the band a chance to really shine and whatnot through the whole weekend of the 50th. That was some of the things that were back in the day that they were trying to find ways to get the band involved, and that's why you do get the Blues Brothers and some of these other wonderful things going on. And but you could really tell to them celebrating the way they did for the 50th and giving everybody that worked on the show as much credit as they did. I thought it was hilarious that they did the little bit with the writers all standing outside in their seats. But they still got their tip of the hat, you know what I mean? But there was just so much you get for a show like this that is 50 years old that it was impossible, even in the amount of time that they did, to give the perfect tip of the hat to everybody. And I do think that they sprinkled in enough things through the whole weekend. They did a slight to Gilda Radner the night before during the concert part with
Right.
Steve Martin, and that is still a perfect bit that they see each other from the part of the room, and then all of a sudden they just start dancing. It's all like weird, shitty dancing. It's not like ballroom dancing, right? It's very Steve Martin, very Gilda Radner, perfect from the heart.
Yeah.
But I think they found enough ways to do that little subtle nod to everybody and call it, good. But to your point, there was always going to be somebody that was going to be left out and trying to even do that in a few hours over the weekend.
So now that we're good, so now we've obviously talked about the 50th anniversary special a little bit, which I know we're going to constantly go circling back and everything. After that first initial few seasons, when we have the original, cast, the not ready for primetime players, we kind of see a ebb and flow of the cast, where it kind of goes up and down, and then we get into the dark ages of the of the 80s, which is what I would say
Yeah.
is like the early to mid 80s were not good for Saturday Night Live as far as cast. I mean, when we talk about the early
Not until you
80s,
nail it hard with all of a sudden had Eddie Murphy and
you have
whatnot. But to that
right,
point, there was a year there. It was like, oh my God. And Lorne Michaels wasn't part of the TV show anymore. And he came back to quote unquote save Saturday night. And apparently they did just enough.
right. You know, but
And
that's
it
the
ended
that's the
that
thing though.
season with the best bit ever. And it's so dark. I don't know if you saw this or not, but it was some of those things I've been watching the documentary stuff that they have on Peacock for the
Mhm.
Saturday Night Live thing. And they have a specific episode of the documentary about that season.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
it was the whole season was ended with them all, yeah, we made it through the series. And they're like popping the champagne in the locker room and everything like that and goofing around. Then all of a sudden, whoever the host, oh, it was the Billy Martin, the Yankees manager that was famously known for flying off the handle, was freaking pouring gasoline on the door of the locker room. And you see Lauren come over all of a sudden and go, "Hey, Billy, what are you doing? You know, you can't do that." And he goes, "You would kill the whole cast." And you can see the wheels were turning. And so he goes into the locker room after the fire had already been started, grabs just John Lovitz and runs out of the room and lets everybody burn. And it says Saturday Night Live will return? Question mark. Left
So
everybody hanging, but that was the last bit they did that year was quote unquote Lauren letting everybody, no longer be of this earth.
so I had watched or I had looked up a few like bigger name stars that actually had been on Saturday Night Live, but they were part of this like very short-lived. Like there are some that like Ben Stiller, people may not know, was on. Um, but
People
did
forget
you
Billy
know that?
Crystal was only on for the 1 year, but he was a writer from day one.
Right,
Right? He's in
right.
that movie we talked up.
But I watched one of those documentaries and it had Tracy Morgan and a few others that were on there, and a lot of them,
Yep.
they were picked up as writers before they were cast members, and some of them were just picked up just to be writers, and some of them hated writing. I know that Chris Farley was
Which
not a
is just
writer; he
torture.
hated writing. But
Yes, and that was why him and David Spade became such good friends, because David would help him write the sketches and he could help perform, and they were just married at the hip, and that's where all the movies and everything obviously came from. But to your point, the talent level writing wise, all over the place, and this is the story of Tina Fey down to a point. She got hired as a writer. They
mhm,
were like, okay, well, you're pretty damn good as a somebody that can just do the bits. So she moved a little bit going that direction. And then for every once in a while, you get the other ones where somebody didn't really work out on screen and they turn around and make them a writer, so it's very, to a certain point, fluid, right?
right. So so
Oh.
I so I'm going to ask you, do you know who is the, without looking, you probably already looked, but I'm going to ask you anyways. Trivia question. Who is the cast member who was a part of the full-blown cast that had the shortest tenure?
Crap. It's got to be the Wayne's brother, right?
No.
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 Marlon
So,
Wayans was only on for like 2
for like half
episodes,
the
and then
season.
he hated it, and he kicked it. He hated it, and he more or
Hated
less did
it.
what he wanted to on the one episode, and they kicked him off. Go ahead.
So
Who was it then? Because I'm not sure
so
if I
it's
know this one.
Laurie Metcalf. Laurie Metcalf, who plays Roseanne's sister on Roseanne and on The Conners. She played Sheldon Cooper's
Forgot.
mom in The Big Bang Theory.
Yep.
So she was on as a cast member. She was hired as a cast member, but only made it to one episode. And
I totally forgot about that.
I believe it was 1981, if I remember reading that correctly. And she was supposed to play, she played a Weekend Update correspondent, and she was on that one episode. And then the writer strike happened. So then obviously the show went on a hiatus. and she was never asked to come back once the writer strike was over. So it was so she is the shortest living that was on season 6. So yeah, that was
I did not know
1981.
that.
Yep.
So, seeing we're gonna play fun with trivia, I got to be this guy now. So, who has hosted Saturday Night Live the most times?
Ooh.
You got to think of somebody
So
that's had an extensive run of being,
yeah.
popular.
So
And
I'm
I'm
gonna
going to give you the number is 17 times this
17.
gentleman has hosted. And there's the other
17.
part, gentleman.
So 17. That would have to be. Um, I'm gonna say the originator of the Five Timers Club, Tom Hanks.
That would have been a very good guess because that was actually my guess when I looked this up. It's actually Alec Baldwin.
Oh, that's right.
17 fucking
You know
times.
what? They might as well just have made him a regular cast member because it's like he lives in Studio 8H.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Steve Martin is 15. John Goodman, 13. Buck Henry, I didn't even think about that one, but way back when the show started, he was on all the time, 10 times. It's in all the samurai stuff.
Yep.
And then Tom Hanks has got 8. So he's the 5th gentleman.
But he's the one that originated the Five Timers Club, which
is
has
still a great bit.
it is still a great bit. You know,
Did you see
I
the
wouldn't
one
even
most
mention it.
recently with Martin Short did his 5th
Yes.
time this year?
Yes.
I thought it was funny that freaking John Mulaney and Scarlett Johansson are the ones actually really ribbing him in that whole episode for that whole piece. Yeah, it's like Scarlett's got 6. I didn't know that, but it's like okay. But that was really funny to see him graduate from the the bellboy helping Steve Martin in the Five Timers club to
Yeah.
being obviously now a member of the Five Timers Club. Really cool.
So
So is that a
they
good segue? What are your favorite bits or sketches?
so I was actually gonna go into that because I was gonna say, obviously I'm a Matt Foley fan. I like Matt Foley. Um, so
You like being on a steady government cheese diet?
but not every Matt Foley bit was gold. The one with David Spade and
It's Christine Applegate, the OG,
Christina
the
Applegate, thank
original.
you. That was by far the best one. But one of my other favorites is the Debbie Downer when they're at Disney, and it's oh my god, it's hilarious because every single last one of them break in that episode. You know,
It's
so
just
if you
so down.
it is.
It's a
It
great
is.
one.
It's Lindsay Lohan. That's the same one where it's like they make fun of Harry Potter when they come back and
Yeah.
everybody's like overly developed, which was also one of those problematic sketches that they brought up. but those were, and then then you have some of the like really silly goofy ones that just were, you don't know who came up with them, but for some reason they worked, like Toonces the driving cat.
Just mowing people down.
It's
Like
hilarious.
that was in the same ballpark as like Deep Thoughts with Jack Handy to me. It's like you're expecting this wonderful Zen moment, and then there's the zinger at the end, like they did the other night in the 50th. So I want to go back to the Matt Foley bit because that is one that people go to pretty regularly as one of their personal favorites, Tommy. And I think outside of it putting Chris Farley on full display, it's the physical comedy. There he is. It's the going through the table. It's the making everybody that knew the delivery and everything because Chris Farley showed up from dress rehearsal and did nothing but take that to 11 to begin with. It wasn't like he showed up and half-assed it. So the fact that David Spade is dying laughing. There he is. And after asking David Spade what he would like to do with his life, and then getting the shitty, I don't hear you've been using your paper for writing, but I hear if I'm rolling doobies, and then moving that next bit to Christina Applegate, making Chris Farley, who is already dialed up all the way and like he's jacked up on, what do they say, 13 cups of coffee or something like
Yeah.
that to begin the whole bit. And she just goes, I want to live in a van down by the river, like every Gen Xer on the planet.
Well, you'll have plenty of
this
time to live in a
plans.
van down by the river when you're living in a van down by the river.
The pause was perfect. He goes, like it's like he hadn't registered it in his brain yet that's what she said. Well, you'll have plenty of time to live in a van down by the river when you're living in a van. Just perfect. So my top 3, I want to give you one that I don't think actually gets enough credit. And it is this
Don't
one
say cowbell because
Carrey,
everybody loves cowbell.
I'm gonna get there. Don't worry about the cowbell. It's actually Jim Carrey's the host, and he's actually supervising as the lifeguard of the world's smallest fucking hot tub. You seen this one?
No.
So somebody's
How did I
sitting in
miss
there and
that?
they got like it's Will Ferrell in the tub or in the hot tub, and he's like all of a sudden got a foot cramp, so you kind of see him like working out the foot. And then Chris Farley's got the binoculars, even though he's only sitting like 3 feet away from him, and he's up in the nest and everything for the lifeguard. He's eyeballing him with the binoculars. He goes, "What's that? What's
You mean
going
Jim
on?"
Carrey? You mean Jim Carrey,
Yes,
right?
Jim Carrey.
Okay.
Yes. And Will Ferrell just simply says, I just got a small cramp. And he's like, cramp! And he like acts like it's like somebody's dying in the pool, grabs the like thing that you put over and starts putting the like rubber duckies in a tube on and all this stuff. It was just peak physical comedy for the two of them. And I would highly recommend anybody looking that one up and seeing it, because Jim Carrey already the master of physical comedy, and then having him in a bit like that, I cannot believe Will Ferrell kept a straight face to this whole thing, because it was just so dialed up, so ridiculous. And to your next point, I think we'd be talking very big problems if we were not talking about the cowbell incident.
Yes.
Have you heard the story of Christopher Walken on that bit yet?
I don't know.
So Will Ferrell in prep, I'm assuming, for going to the Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary and everything kind of ramping up. He's been on some talk shows and talking about Saturday Night Live. And Jimmy Fallon was the one obviously asking him this question. That's the late night show he was on with his old buddy. And he goes, hey, have you seen Christopher Walken anytime recently? Because he was in that bit too, like as his first on-screen Saturday Night Live bit that Jimmy Fallon's in is that one. And he goes, yeah, I saw him recently, and you wouldn't believe what he said to me. And he goes, Will, you ruined my life.
I have heard that. I have heard that.
Because the whole point is that Christopher Walken has an amazing body of work, right? Mm-hmm. He's been a Bond villain. He's been in all these movies. He's won Oscars. Pick a thing, right? No, what does everybody remember him for?
Cowbell.
The cowbell. I got a fever.
I gotta say though, there's another story about Christopher Walken and SNL that I love, and it's a Foo Fighters reference, and I believe it's when Dave Grohl tells the story of when Christopher Walken came up to him and goes, so when you say Foo Fighters, where's the emphasis? Is it on the Foo or the Fighters? And Dave Grohl's like, it's just Foo, but he's like, it's just Foo Fighters. And so he goes, okay. So when he goes, ladies and gentlemen, Foo Fighters.
Foo Fighters. And of course he's sitting there like trying to frickin' amp up, and he's all laughing his ass off and trying to start singing and everything, but perfect stuff. Christopher Walken, another guy that's in the Five Timers Club too, by the way.
and the thing is that now Christopher Walken is always part of my jokes. Like I'll say, why don't we make like Christopher and start walking?
I just like that's one of the very few like actual impressions I can do that everybody's like, oh, well, nice job, that was pretty good, because it's about the stutter and the getting it right. So my third one though, I love Wayne's World, surprise, but they did a bit when they both just came back to do a cold open, like old Wayne and Garth, and they did their their top 10 Oscar picks at the time, and this is at the time where Toy Story 3 came out. So that just gives you some time frame reference and everything. And there was this movie called Winter's Bone, was apparently some high ranked movie. I was like, so they kept like oddly cutting to the camera and going Winter's Bone. The other one that you mentioned was, like I said, with Toy Story was, what teenager doesn't want to play with his Woody anymore? This movie's not realistic. But
So
to that point, I love those bits. I love that stuff. But there has been so many good Saturday Night Live sketches over the years. There's been funny things that have happened on the reoccurring thing every week is the weekend update. Countless awesome fun things. And the one I liked the most recently was funny enough on that same episode where you were talking about the Five Timers Club with Martin Short getting inducted into that. Scarlett Johansson was there that night.
mm-hmm.
Scarlett Johansson's husband is Colin Jost, who is currently on the cast and does Weekend Update with Michael Che.
Mm-hmm.
They have had, I'll say, the best run of Weekend Update because I love the fact that they pass each other jokes and they cold read them. I think that is hysterical. They clearly get each other's fun. They know where to push the line and where they can't. But holy shnikes, the stuff that Che sent him that night with knowing Scarlett Johansson was there, her reactions to it.
I got to say, there's a slight correction on that. They do that at the season end, which is always the Christmas episode is their season end or their half season end, and then they pick up again after the Christmas holiday. But they do that. They those cold jokes, and I forget. I forget they had, I believe, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s wife on there, and Colin Jost was saying some of the most vile things, and she had to have been a good sport. She had to have obviously have known because I was sitting in my seat going, oh my God, this is not going to go well. This is not going to go well for anybody. but they know
I
how
had to have had her in on it.
They know how to teeter the line with that. And I think that's absolutely brilliant that they allow them to do that. And they know that there's no malice, there's no meanness behind it. It's the meanness is writing those jokes so that somebody else has to read them cold, and that's that was one of the things that I loved about the Stefan character, Bill Hader's character, Stefan, because they would write those things on the cue cards on the spot. So whenever he's holding up his hands like this, he's actually dying because he's trying to figure out how he's going to deliver this line. He doesn't know.
It sold the character so well, though. Just some stupid other ones. There's not many days that quasi working as an IT guy. I don't know if you ever saw these ones where it was Jimmy Fallon as the company's IT guy. Yes. Nick Burns, the company's, and he would have like Jennifer Aniston sitting there and going, I can't figure this thing out. And he would yell at him and go, and then was that so hard? Stupid things like that. There's so many of them over the years. I always died laughing watching it. I said it was not the politically correct one, but John Belushi as the samurai was always a hilarious thing. They did one where it was like a disco bit where it was like dancing around with a sword and almost killing people by accident, doing a disco fever freaking rip off. There was one I saw recently that I was dying laughing, and I'm like, oh my God, that fits so much better today. It was Jane Curtin and Lorraine Newman, and they were the construction workers on the job site, hooting at men when they walk by instead of it being what is obviously the stereotype of the other way around. Dan Aykroyd walked by in some short shorts. Yeah, baby, shake it.
If you haven't seen the movie Saturday Night, I highly suggest it. It's a great movie, and I'm going to only assume that it's pretty accurate of what the first hour and a half before the very first episode of Saturday Night Live was. Lauren, running around trying to get things, trying to reel in, John Belushi, So if you haven't seen it, I highly suggest it. It's a great one. So one of the things that I got to say is, over the past, I would have to say past 10, 15 years, probably even more so. Saturday Night Live has always kind of had a little bit of a political spin. They've always, whenever political leaders were in the news, they would, ad nauseum at times would create skits with, when the Bill Clinton scandal was going on,
Ross Perot.
Phil Hartman was Bill Clinton a few times, and Daryl Hammond was a Bill Clinton a few times. But
Dana Carvey was always George Bush Senior.
right. And whenever I would do, and funny thing about that, and I'll go back to my point, but is whenever I do like an impersonation, it's never me doing the impersonation of that person. It's me doing Dana Carvey doing that person.
Exactly.
Not and that.
That's how my Ross Perot is. This is how it is. Anyway.
But to my point is I feel like because of the political landscape that we live in these days, and I know that this isn't a political show, and our show is not a political show, but we would be, Saturday Night Live has become a little too political, whereas I miss the old days of reoccurring characters that were always good. Whenever they brought that character back, everybody would just go crazy because it's like, oh my God, like, Mike Myers and Simon. Well, my name is Simon. And another skit with Macaulay Culkin that was problematic.
In a tub.
Shirtless. Yeah. With a shirtless Mike Myers. But I miss those characters because even during the times of the early 2000s, even the mid 2000s, we had great characters. And when we go to the characters, a lot of these cast members who came from groups like Second City and the Groundlings and the Upright Citizens Brigade being some of these groups that they honed their skills with, they port those characters with them to Saturday Night Live. So your Matt Foley's with Chris Farley, that was a character he had when he was with Second City.
Dialed in.
And even the short-lived Martin Short, who was a cast member during the dark ages, if you will. Ed Grimley was a character that he not only had when he was coming up, but Ed Grimley was also on SCTV, which was kind of the sketch comedy show in Canada, but he brought that to the States with SNL. So leading into that, who are your top 3 reoccurring characters?
Oh, that's a good one.
Of any cast.
Like I said, I'll give the easy one. I always loved Wayne and Garth. Anytime I saw them, that was always a great one. I had a weird obsession for some reason. I liked Adam Sandler doing Opera Man. I don't know what it was. I think it was because he sold me on the Boy. Oh God, no, Canteen Boy. Speaking of Alec Baldwin, creepy. Oh God. But Opera Man had that weird thing where I think I got hooked because he did the ripoff of Even Flow from Pearl Jam in like opera voice, and I'm like, that's funny. That sold me. There was the one that, funny enough, I'm going to go back to a Christopher Walken character here. He always used to do whenever he was on the show, and it was called The Continental, and it was just he would quote unquote invite people up to his room, and he was just a promiscuous sleazeball, and it was just so ridiculous and over the top that the way they did it from a first person view with the camera moving around the set and everything was rather amusing watching him get his comeuppance. But another one I'll just say, I loved the random stupid thing that they used to do with the land shark in the original ones. Oh, you're that clever land shark, I'm not opening my door, and then he would go Candygram. Change what he was, and then okay, and then they open the door with the Jaws music and everything.
So that's actually good because that's from the original or the original
That's
season.
OG.
Yeah, that's an OG character.
That was Chevy Chase dicking around apparently backstage, and it turned into a bit.
Yes, yes.
So, but but that's what the fun is, right? You could clearly tell with a lot of those characters that became the reoccurring characters: a land shark, a church lady, Wayne and Garth, Will Ferrell doing the Celebrity Jeopardy stuff, whatever it might be. There's another one we didn't talk about.
I know. But again,
So,
characters.
but yeah,
Even Norm Macdonald said, playing a parody
Reynolds.
of Burt Reynolds, and then saying, he goes, I didn't even do a Burt Reynolds impression. I just did my voice, but just pretended to be Burt Reynolds. And it's a funny hat.
He just turned cocky. That's really all it is. Turd Ferguson. It's funny. Funny name.
But so I like some of the newer characters that well, back in the day. So Canandaigua's own Kristen Wiig, she was born, Rochester's own. But she plays one of the what is it, the Morel sisters?
Oh
Yeah, the Morel sisters. She plays Dunice with the baby hands. That's hilarious. That's yeah.
She ended up spanking freaking Kim Kardashian on the 50th anniversary with the little hands. Yep. I couldn't believe it. And with Robert Goulet, with Will Ferrell, and you go, my holy forehead, and it did like the Mike Myers, Austin Powers bit, and he couldn't get away from the fact that it was like all forehead with her.
but even Kristen Wiig had a lot of characters that she actually, and if you ever watched, they had a special on Peacock where they showed some of the early years where they showed some of those audition tapes. The Target lady, she brought those characters with her, and eventually they made their way onto the show. So she's obviously had those characters that she developed for over years of practice.
I got another one that gets forgotten because it was such a shine high moment, but Eddie Murphy was only on the show for so many years, and it was right.
He was
Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood.
I was going to mention him. I was going to say Mr. Robinson's
Neighborhood. Hey kids, this is how we answer the door in my neighborhood. What is it?
another skit that turned into a movie, but they were reoccurring characters, dating back to the original cast, the Coneheads. And they ended up getting a movie in the 90s,
many years later,
decades later, because somehow, some way, everybody gets that nostalgic, and again, I blame Wayne's World for making Lorne Michaels think that he's got hits.
Dang, we could go Hollywood.
That's
but
the one thing I have
the Blues Brothers was in the 80s too. That wasn't right then and there either. But there was a time where they had the top record, the top album, and they were top comedy stars between the two of them. So
right. And they were good. Yeah. They were good. People went to see them.
Yep.
But yeah, exactly. I mean, so I have to ask you this now. I have one that always makes me just die. And I'm going to ask you, out of all of the parody commercials, which one is your favorite? And I'll tell you what mine is. You could probably already guess, but every time I see this, I die laughing. Oops, I crap my pants. Oh my God. Yep. That one
Thank
hands
you,
down.
Oops, I crap my pants.
That one hands
Mine's not terribly far. Mine's not terribly far from that, but Colon Blow. It was just a box of frickin' basically,
the fiber
chunks. It looked like it was all sharp, jagged, like you were, something you would get out of
and then
a
super
volcano. Yeah, in case you weren't blowing your pants enough. I'll go back to one of the OG ones. Do you remember John Belushi doing the little chocolate donuts? And he was like, "Here's John Belushi training for the decathlon," and watching him flip over the high vault and everything like that. And then he goes, when I'm training to be an Olympian, and he's smoking a cigarette, which is hilarious too. I eat my tiny chocolate donuts every morning, and I use like pounds, like a handful of them all at once. Or the Bassomatic 3000 was also another perfect one.
Gastomatic. Oh my god. Yeah. I gotta say, I love Saturday Night Live. I'm actually turning 50 myself. So to me, I kind of grew up with Saturday Night Live. I loved, even there, even the dark years, I would have to say it had its moments,
And that's the
um,
beauty of it. It doesn't matter, even when people are like, "Oh, the new cast doesn't do anything good." It depends on who's hosting it. It's like that's how it always has been. It's not all lightning in a bottle. You're canning certain great moments. And I was, when we pivoted to this show really quickly, just Google a bunch of things on to get some things fresh in my head, and it's like, oh my god, dude, just like the David S. Pumpkins thing with frickin'
love it.
Tom
Love
Hanks.
it. I loved
I
it.
forgot completely about that. 100 Floors of Horrors, and 78 of them were frickin' Pumpkins. And just like it's a
You
bunch of
know,
Spanx and
actually, that's actually become a working joke in my house. When whatever the topic is, and something allows for me to get that comeback, I always say, "Hey, that's David Pumpkins. It's its own thing."
this is all. You guys really leaned into the David S. Pumpkins things. Were you out of material?
And funny enough, that David S. Pumpkins came back maybe 2 other times, but then he also got a cartoon special.
I should know that. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it got a cartoon special, and you can actually buy the David Pumpkins, suit, Halloween suit on, like, Amazon.
That's great. Fun.
I'm
But
my own
that's
thing.
the point. For every time you get something cool, this thing, that thing, or whatever, you're gonna get something that is gold. One of the ones that I really enjoyed recently was Ryan Gosling was one of the hosts, and they did a Beavis and Butthead thing while Maya Rudolph is like trying
Mhm.
to really be
Yeah.
Steve, super serious. But oh my god, he was perfect Beavis. It's like, or Butthead, I mean, and I forget who played Beavis, but it was hysterical.
That, I think, was Mikey Day, the one of the cast
You
members.
might, yes, but you could have made a real, because everything else goes live action. What would Beavis and Butthead look like in real life? Oh, there they are.
There they are. One character that I always loved, and I always liked seeing him on, and it's always a weekend update. Besides Stefan, because I think Stefan and Seth Meyers, that banter between the two of them is freaking. I loved it. I loved it. But Drunk Uncle, something's got to be said about Drunk Uncle. I love because
That was spot on the
maybe
other night
maybe
too,
maybe because I grew up in a family that you had a drunk uncle.
or many, depending on the family.
But but that's but that bit, because you trust me, when you're
Everybody's
drunk
got a drunk
and you
uncle.
start going through the different phases of being drunk and then just being, like, depressed and then singing, I've been there. I'm not gonna lie, I've been there.
And then you hope by the end of the sketch that he doesn't have an "oops, I crap my pants" moment.
Mhm. That's not
Uh,
yeah.
that's a good
Oh,
one.
man, but I hope that they keep going, you know, it's it's one of those things that, like The Simpsons, if it went away, to me, there would just be this void, The Simpsons being, the longest running scripted comedy show, and SNL being, the longest running live program, you know? I would have to say
Yeah.
it would be oh, I was gonna say you look like you just lost your lighting.
My monitor does that every once in a while when I'm
Yeah,
changing from screens. Movie
sleep
mode
mode.
bullshit. So one night we actually, I can't believe I didn't bring this up because I was dying laughing. There was two from the Will Ferrell years. It was Mary Kathleen Gallagher was the superstar.
Yep.
Was hysterical,
Got a movie.
and it's one of those stupid things that comes up from time to time. Was when you get nervous, you just kind of.
Kieran asked me, and she's like, "Have you ever done that?" I go, "No, who does
No,
that?"
no, it's not that bit. Never. Other than that, just trying to be humorous. And then the Sherry O'Terry and Will Ferrell being the Spartan cheerleaders.
Yep, yep.
No, they're trying to be like cheerleaders at a freaking chess event, and they're
That's because they couldn't make the
they're all like,
actual cheer team. They were their own.
yeah,
They're their own thing. They're like David
they're the
Pumpkin.
wrong thing. But that was one of those ones, and Sherry's one of those ones that unfortunately I think gets lost in the shuffle. But she's been doing great comedy for years, not just on Saturday Night Live, and always seems to be that throw-in character. I'm like, oh, I know her.
Yeah,
But perfect.
it is. It's one of those things that it's just I would like to see it keep going, that even as Lauren, moves on or gives up, somebody else takes the mantle and takes the torch and just keeps it going, because I think at this point in time, it's an institution now. When you that's one of that I would have to say that's one of my biggest um hopes or dreams is one day hosting Saturday Night Live. Now, obviously, I am not in any way, shape, or form a celebrity. I think I am, but I'm
Yeah.
not. but
Yeah,
that would
whatever's
be
in
the
between the
dream.
ears, bud.
That would be the dream. Like, dreaming of winning an Academy Award and standing up on stage and thanking everybody under the sun, and but also going and being on the stage at Studio 8H and giving a monologue and being in a bunch of skits, and then being in some really shitty skits after the Weekend Update, because that's like the last half hour, and it's like by then nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's the
Exactly,
B
but that's
side
the fun
of
of it.
Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, I'd happily be on that B side, C side, F side, whatever the hell. That's what it
You
is.
know, but that's what we're, that obviously that was a dream of mine, is always to be either a cast member or a host, and seeing what people went through when they were auditioning. It sounds nerve-wracking. I've
Yeah,
auditioned for things before, and where you have when you got people saying, just so you know, Lauren doesn't laugh, and
at
nobody
anything.
laughs, and nobody laughs when you're at these auditions. So you're coming out with what you think is your A
Scale
material,
is
and nothing is getting a laugh. And that screws with your mind. And I go back to a time when I actually auditioned for the Jiva Theater's improv group, and that's back when they had a house improv group. And I got 2 callbacks, and it was actually really cool. But by the time they were casting people, they had disbanded, and it was just like crap.
son of
but but
a.
but but for that audition, you actually had people that actually, you know, were other people that were auditioning, plus the other cast, and they actually, when they laughed, you knew you did something, you hit on something, you
Yeah,
know, and the but
and did you hear the story that Jimmy Fallon told recently about? I can't remember if it was on the 50th or if there was some side note from everything, but he did his Adam Sandler impression not too long after Adam Sandler had left or
Mhm.
been fired from Saturday Night Live. And that was one of the few ones that actually got Lauren to break character a little bit, because 2 things: he obviously loved Adam, and he must have done a damn good job
Right.
with that bit. So, so
Why don't you
but
call
to
your
that point, that's the
mother?
fun of it. Yeah. Oh God. And wouldn't you just let the boy eat your food? Chew it a little bit. It's one of those stupid. uh, but for every one thing you got like that with all those wonderful characters, you get something that's gold, like we were talking about with like an Olympia restaurant, a Celebrity Jeopardy, and
Mhm.
then you unfortunately get the ones that fall flat on their face. You never hear from again. But there is so many ones I'm curious if I went back and watched those episodes from the ones that didn't hit, just knowing the comedy landscape that there were so many things that might not have hit because they were ahead of the curve, because you did have all these funny people in the room, or maybe they were just that bad. My question would be, are they really just that bad?
I would have to say that cast that came after the originals and after Lorne had left for that 5 years that he was gone, I would have to say that people really didn't take to a new cast. They could have been the most hilarious people in the world, but when you get something, some people don't like change. So when you get
Yeah.
something new and you're used to Belushi, Radner, Murray, Chase, all, everybody that was on that original cast, and then all of a sudden they leave and now you got all these other people. Who's Robert Downey Jr.? We don't know. Anthony Michael Hall.
As a kid,
Nobody knew who
as a
he
kid with the
was.
Breakfast Club here,
Right? It's like you mean the nerd from 16 Candles?
Yes. The only actual comedian on that sketch was freaking Cousin Eddie.
Right. And so you got to ask yourself. I mean, and then even Bill Murray's brother, you know, was
Yeah.
on Weekend Update for like a short half second. He even mentioned him in the 50th, you know.
Yep.
But at
Outside of the fact that then for every person you have that's on for 5 seconds, you have somebody like Kean Thompson right now that's on a run of freaking what, 10, 12 years. He won't
he's
go
actually
away.
no, he's been on since 2004,
Oh my
maybe.
god, it's almost 20.
So 20
I'm looking that
so
one up now.
21
Going to
years.
the stats.
Go to the stats, pull it up. What is it? I want to say it's 21 years this year.
It's a long way from all that and Good Burger.
I know.
Since 2003.
So 22 years, dude. 22 years. Dude, it has the longest
I see
run.
why they've been I feel like I see why they're ribbing him so bad now.
Right. But the thing is that it's even been said that a lot of the cast members say that when Keenan leaves, that will be the end of the show.
And wouldn't it be the worst thing in the
he
world that
decides
he's
to be
the
the new
heir to
Lorne.
the throne? Yeah, exactly. That's where I was going. Is the worst thing in the world that he's the new heir to the throne and he can come over and do his Lorne Michaels impression while he's starting to get his feet in the door on it?
But yeah, I mean,
that's too funny.
but it was it's a great show. It's still a great show. It's not always gonna hit, but that's the beauty of live television. It's not gonna hit, and you wait for those moments when the characters break and they're trying to hold in laughs. I know from doing improv with some really funny people and just not being able to keep a straight face and have to kind of just wipe the scene away and just go away because exactly. But that's neither here nor there. But those are the moments that make Saturday Night Live some of the best TV that you get is when, Jimmy Fallon of all people, who always breaks character because he can't keep he can't keep it to himself,
No.
But
Like
he's
he
always
laughs at everything.
he is notorious for breaking. It still is to this day,
No, they
but,
still rip him for it all the time.
oh yeah.
He's just
Oh
known
yeah.
for it now. So, Tommy, before we wrap the show, I want to make one final point because you did mention it's been 50 years. Where does the show go from here? And I truly, truly hope this is one of those things that, like I said, like we've been talking about here, is around for the long haul still, regardless of it being 50, because it is one of those few safe spots in comedy that still exists.
Yep.
And it is the one place that the satire level can be there. You can have fun when you want to. It is something that is desperately needed in the world and the climate we all need to have that mental break or that good rib at whatever the hell the actual topic is and get something to actually maybe, hey, sometimes a joke can be the reason that we spur something in the right direction to what we were talking about that we try to avoid on this show, being not a political podcast, but there is enough crazy going on in the world today that you do need that break, or like I said, that fun rib and jab at the actual reality to it. And I just can't picture a world that I can't, even the day after, a couple weeks or whatever, I got nothing to watch. I can't just flip on an episode of Saturday Night Live and have a good laugh. So I don't want to live in that world, Tommy. I don't care who's running it. Is there anything you'd like to add or talk to the end of the show?
I agree with you. I'd like to see it continue. I would like to see more characters. You can still keep with the political satire as much, but don't make that the catalyst of the show the way it seems like it's kind of taken over. I like the crutch. I like the Diego. Diego has become a new reoccurring character, so I like the Diego stuff, especially with when the girls are out there singing and the groom is just kind of oblivious to all this, and he's like,
yeah, that was a great bit they had the other night too. That was right up there with Lady Gaga singing about her dick in a box, but that's besides the point.
Exactly. But so in closing, I would say, well, I just shameless self-plug stuff, but other than that, hey, here's to another 50 years for SNL. Hopefully, who knows? It might be around just like cockroaches and Twinkies will be here even after the apocalypse. So
we saw her the other night, Cher. That's always the other joke, right?
Hey, if she could turn back time, she'd still look like Cher. Oh, okay. So shameless self-plug. So as I said, on March 9th, I'm gonna, you know what, buddy, unless you have something else you can't do, that's March 9th is a Sunday. So we will be at the Niagara Con, I think that's what it's called, but we're gonna be emceeing and judging the cosplay contest, just like what we did this last month, as a matter of fact, at the
in
anime
frigid January.
God. And so
that was a snowy February, but that's besides the point.
So if you're in the Niagara Falls area, and I'll post more stuff once I get more information as to location and stuff like that. But I was hit up by the guy who actually puts it on and asked if I would be a part of that, and I will. And then March 4th, the Flint Hill Dance Troupe will be resuming their practices. So if you are in the Rochester area and you wanted to come and try some 19th century dance, by all means, hit us up. I will give you the information that you need. So hit us up in the DMs or in the comment section, and I assure you we will look and see, and I will get in contact with you. Or you can go to the Instagram page, which is Flint Hill Dance Troupe. And you got that. And then hopefully I auditioned for a short film that will be filming in Buffalo. So I don't know if I got the part. Hopefully I do get the part, but
someday, somehow.
But I also actually got a voice acting gig, small part, but it's to get my foot in the door and to try something new. So be on the lookout for that. I will give you more information once I get it, but I just have to record a few lines and send them in, and then I get my IMDb credit.
There you go. There's the guy. So on that note, also, if you happen to be wandering around next week here in the Rochester, New York area, you better find yourself over to the Village Gate so that we can hang out with you, possibly at the Village Gate Toy Show. I'm going to be walking around filming. We're going to give out our cards. We're going to talk to people. We're going to try finding some more lovely human beings to be on this show and goof around with Tommy and myself. And we're going to have some fun collecting toys and talk to the vendors. So there's that one, Tommy. That's next Sunday,
I really think we should just get a table and just be like the TNC Random Fandom podcast live from the toy fair.
Our friends at the Yankee Clipper might be okay with that.
Are they?
So
They're still the ones that head it up, right? Or is it somebody else?
they no longer, since unfortunately the passing of the father that ran the shop, and they've taken it over. Some other people have taken over the toy show, but they are still a massive contributor to that, obviously, because they're the reason that there is the Village Gate Toy Show. So that is the biggest one easily here in the Rochester area, and pretty much I would say one of the bigger ones in the I-90 here in the western parts of New York. Make sure you attend and check out everything you can. And obviously, head over to our friends at the Yankee Clipper and make sure you say hello, because they were looking very, very forward to talking about their story and the wonderful collectibles that have walked in and out of their walls today. We will have them on shortly. We just do not have it's a TBD date at the moment from them being sick.
Yep. And I can honestly say that Craig and I have both purchased things from the Yankee Clipper, and I would have to say, price-wise, they are by far the most competitive. They are good with the way that they price things, even on some of the more rare collectibles. And I think that they even, correct me if I'm wrong, but they probably haggle a little bit because they are a secondhand store. But
I've had very good luck with them over the years, period, let alone at the toy show. So they have brand new baseball cards and things like that all the time. Obviously, massive amounts of collectibles, but check them out. They are an awesome stop when you're here in Rochester, New York at the Village Gate.
And I got one more thing before we sign off. Also, remember, hit up our friends at SB Design Build. That's SB Design Build. They are the ones that do our t-shirts. And so if you are still interested in that, we will in our Instagram, it's a link in the bio. Go and get a TNC Random Fandom podcast. Spread the word. If you like what we're doing, by all means, spread the word. We would love to have more of you listening and contributing to our show, because without you, we don't have a show. And it's you who actually creates this show for us. We are merely a vessel for you to spill out your fandom for the world to enjoy.
There it is. So make sure you give us that like, share, comment, whatever the hell it is. Give us all those wonderful things on the internet so we can have those wonderful conversations with you, get you on the show, talk about your fandom, and we will have more fun and shenanigans to be had. I promise. So on that note, everybody, make sure you click us, follow wherever, like I mentioned, on Instagram, Facebook, X. Please, the YouTube is always the easy ones. Instagram is definitely our most fruitful one outside of a lot of these at the moment. But at TC Random Fandom, and obviously wherever you get your podcasting pleasures from, we are there for you to listen to. We are live every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, we are happy to talk. Make sure you link us up, and we will talk to get you on this show. Until next week, we have a wonderful time, and we hope to see you at the Village Gate Toy Show next week. Cheers.
Cheers. Good night, everybody.